Hi, I'm Kasey Koski, Curator of Exhibits for the Wenatchee Valley Museum and Cultural Center, and wanted to take a few minutes to talk about the Washington State Apple Blossom Festival. As you all know, last year we celebrated the 100th festival here in Wenatchee, and the museum has an extensive collection of photographs and artifacts from the festival history. This year we'll be missing all of you this week, and hope that we can gather in the future to celebrate together. In 1910, a group of women met to discuss the need for more community pride and culture, and the Ladies Musical Club was formed in 1911 with 51 members. This club, and more specifically Mrs. Susan Wagner, is responsible for initiating the first festival in 1920. Mrs. Wagner based the idea on similar festivals she experienced in her childhood in New Zealand. In the 1920s, it was said this is the most attractive and beautiful spectacle of the year. The first decade of the Apple Blossom Festival was an exciting time to be alive. The First World War had been over for a couple of years, and women were finally given the right to vote. It's a time of prosperity in the Wenatchee Valley, and the valley made many big moves to promote itself with a spring festival. The inaugural festival was put on by the Wenatchee Ladies Musical Club with the help from the Commercial Club. It featured a baseball game, maypole dances, an evening concert in Memorial Park, and the crowning of the first Apple Blossom Queen, Fern Prowell. The Commercial Club, a predecessor of the Chamber of Commerce, sponsored an automobile tour of orchards in bloom. The tour took visitors out of town, up the Wenatchee Valley, stopping in Kashmir for lunch, and then returning to town for more festivities in Memorial Park that evening. In 1921, the Wenatchee Commercial Club took over sponsorship of the entire festival, including the Grand Parade. The following year, more than 250 floats, bands, and marching contingents from various communities participated in two parades: the Industrial Parade on Friday and a parade on Saturday for school children and commercial clubs. Did you know that the Apple Blossom Festival has included a musical review since as early as 1929? And there's been an annual Apple Blossom musical since 1961. In 1929, the Apple Blossom Parade photo shows a two-wheeled vehicle covered in flower petals resembling an airplane. The Elks Minstrels Musical Review, Garden of Eden, an early festival pageant from 1923. There's a photograph of a young boy riding a two-wheeled cart being pulled by a goat. Boys make their way down the parade route, carrying a large hat, advertising for Mills Brothers in 1929. The Wenatchee Apple Blossom Royalty from 1924. Queen's Attendant Zelma Ludenbach, Queen Rowena Burns, Queen Attendant Marjorie Graham, all in their pageantry garb. Another photo from the 20s shows Maud and Moss Rose with two formally clothed attendants in a white carriage pulled by horses in front of the Rose family home on Chelan Street. In the decade of the 1930s, Wenatchee was not spared the aftermath of the 1929 stock market crash. The Apple Blossom Festival continued to be held each spring except for 1932. There was no festival that year as a response to the Great Depression. Instead, Wenatchee High School's prom queen, Marjorie Munch Parkhill, served as Apple Blossom Queen, her reign only lasting the evening of prom. One of the earliest artifacts in our collection is the 1930 dress from Queen Shirley Foster. Some of the other photos from the 1930s include the crowning of the 1930 Apple Blossom Festival, Shirley Foster, cars along Douglas Street and crowds of people at Memorial Park at the festival of 1931, a Dan's fruit and vegetable stand float in the Apple Blossom Parade from 1930, KPQ float from the Apple Blossom Parade also in 1930, a photo of Roger Brown, age 5, and Merritt Newdall, about the same age, pose as two of the three 1931 Apple Blossom Festival Queen train bearers. There's a photo of a decorated truck promoting the Grand Coulee Dam project from the Festival Parade of 1931. Shown on Wenatchee Avenue in the background are Eastman Dentist, the Griggs Building, and the Cascadian Hotel. We also have a 1931 Rotary Club float. Also from 1931, Apple Blossom Festival royalty, coronation with the large stage set up in Memorial Park, as viewed from the courthouse. Seen in the background of this photo are the Wenatchee Presbyterian Church and the Carnegie Library, now the Apple Blossom Festival office. The 1940s were a challenging decade for the festival. There were a number of years where the festival was not celebrated based on World War II. But from 1941, we have a beautiful satin gown that was worn by the Queen Miriam or Mimi Corner. She passed forward a grade in elementary school and was likely the youngest queen to ever serve. She was only age 16. She was born and raised in Wenatchee and lived her entire life here, marrying her high school sweetheart. The 1942 Apple Blossom Queen, Norabelle Jean Roth, while on her travels promoting the festival, was discovered in Hollywood by an MGM representative. She returned to the Wenatchee Valley, finished high school, and then decided to go back to Hollywood. She changed her name to Noreen Nash and appeared in 24 films and some TV. Later on in life, after a successful career and family in her 40s, she went back to college, to UCLA, graduating cum laude in 1971. She still lives in Hollywood. No festivals were held in 1943, 44, or 45 during the dark days of World War II. These years, the queens from Wenatchee High School, senior prom, served as Apple Blossom royalty. In 1946, with the end of the war, the community decided to pull back together for another Apple Blossom Festival. It was at this time it was renamed the Washington State Apple Blossom Festival, and the community was ready to celebrate once again. A Wenatchee World headline from that era reads, "The festive spirit reigns again in the apple capital of the world." Some of the photos from the 1940s show Apple Blossom Festival parade route on Orondo Avenue with crowds sitting in front of the Chelan County Courthouse and Memorial Park in 1948. A military marching band, also in 1948 in front of the courthouse. Wenatchee Apple Shippers Float and the 1940 Apple Blossom Parade. The 1947 Apple Blossom Parade making its way down Wenatchee Avenue. Bagpipers marching in 1948. And a 1940 festival queen, Patricia Clapp, along with Princesses Virginia Moss and Esther Mann, in front of the Thomas Law Service and gas station on the corner of North Wenatchee Avenue and 2nd Street. In the 1950s, the Washington State Apple Blossom Festival was a hard-working apple salesman. Apple Blossom royalty toured north central Washington communities and visited Seattle since 1926. But in the 50s, tours began to spread farther abroad and went as far as Chicago, Los Angeles, and British Columbia. In 1954, Queen Carol Lee Jessup did a 2-week tour visiting California, with stops to visit Bing Crosby in his recording studio. Some of the photos from the 1950s include a 1952 Apple Blossom Queen, Virginia Flick, with a chef and 3 other men looking at a giant apple pie. 1953 Apple Blossom Festival Queen, Carolyn Ellis, with Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis. 1955 Apple Blossom Queen, Sharon Redlinger, passing out apples to teachers. Apple Blossom Festival Queen, Jolly Sachs, being interviewed by KFMB radio in San Diego. And a photo of Fern Cosino Duncan presenting 1957 Apple Blossom Queen, Jewel Bergen, with her crown and scepter. Fern Cosino Duncan was an instructor at Wenatchee High School and Wenatchee Valley College. Fern made individual crowns for Apple Blossom Festival Queens from 1932 until 1959. At the end of her reign, each queen was allowed to take home her crown and scepter. The cost of the crowns was covered by the Wenatchee Seroptimus Club. In 1959, Mrs. Duncan was asked to design a permanent crown for the queen. This first permanent crown was used through the 1967 festival, with other crowns commissioned following it. It was also in the 1950s that the Applearians group was formed. The Apple Blossom Festival needed support, And so the Appalarians, modeled after the Portland Rosarians, became a group that supports the festival in fundraising, providing transportation for the float, and presenting the royalty with scholarships for their service. In 1965, Eastmont High School students were invited to compete to become Apple Blossom royalty. This honor had traditionally only been open to Wenatchee High School students, and prior to this date, East Wenatchee students attended Wenatchee High School. 1969 was the 50th anniversary of the festival. A delegation of 14 came over from Japan to help celebrate. There were two Queen floats that year, one for Miss Yumiko Takanaka, Queen of the Omori Apple Blossom Festival, and one for Queen Linda Parkhill of East Wenatchee. Some of the photos from the 1960s include 1962 royalty, Queen Polly Kenny, and Princess Carolyn Billingsley and Susan Looney on a carousel. A Rotary International float with their royalty in 1961. Rows of cowgirls marching in 1962. The Washington State Apple Blossom Festival has seen impressive growth and change over 100 years. In addition to the parade each year, the community celebration has always included fun activities. People still meet in Memorial Park to indulge in wonderful food and enjoy entertainment. The festival includes something for everyone these days: a car show, bike races, a craft fair, and much more. I'd like to say thank you to all the festival volunteers, the 2020 board, chairpeople, and staff, the cast and crew of Mamma Mia and Music Theater of Wenatchee, Royalty Queen Tess Sparks, Princesses Kia St. John and Kelly Norland, Junior Royalty Queen Brianna Mott, Princess Jane Burns and Grace Cook. We hope to see you later in the year when it's safe to gather for a festival. In the meantime, stay home, stay safe, stay healthy, and we look forward to seeing you soon.